To Warren Buffett on women, work, and other wisdom. We're here at the University of Nebraska, Omaha, with about 150 students, faculty, and a few friends of Warren Buffett on the cusp of annual meeting weekend. This is the first social interview for Warren that he's ever done. We're taking Twitter questions. You can send your questions using the hashtag FortuneBuffett. Please tweet your questions. And this is also, Warren, your first interview, first deep dive on the topic of women in work.
Right.
So my first question is, why now?
Well, it came about because I've talked to college students who come to Omaha on the subject, because I take whatever questions they bring up, and a lot of the questions are about women, and a lot of women are in attendance. I read the galleys of Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, and I thought I might put down some of the ideas I talked about and perhaps have it be a forward for the book. That didn't work out. And then I thought, well, I'll go to the best place of all. And so I called you, and I went to Fortune, and I'm really glad to get these ideas out. I've had them in my head a long time, but this is the first time I've written them down.
So it really is kind of the water cooler conversation that Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook and Marissa Mayer at Yahoo have generated. Is that what really spurred it? Because you've talked on and off about the ovarian lottery.
Right.
And the privilege you've had and the success you've had, because only, half the women...
I only had half the workforce to compete with. I was born in 1930, had a sister on each side, a couple of years on each side, just as smart as I was. They got the same grades in school. The teachers... put them probably higher than I was. They were personable, but they did not have the same opportunities all that I did. And so for both external and internal reasons, which I get into in the article, women just haven't had the same chance. It's gotten a lot better, but it was in 1776 that we said all men are created equal, but somebody had their fingers crossed, because when I got to the Constitution and Article 2 describing the presidency, it kind of slipped in there, all these male pronouns, and we passed the 19th Amendment in 1920, but it was 61 years later before Sandra Day O'Connor got appointed to the Supreme Court.
And what are the odds of that happening naturally?
Well, there were 33 males between the passage of the 20th Amendment and Sandra Day, and for that to be by chance, it's over 8 billion to 1. Yeah, it was not by chance.
So Warren talks about this in a wonderful essay that he wrote for Fortune.com and the Fortune 500 issue, which is on newsstands on Monday. And Warren, it's a terrific piece, and I think a lot of young women are going to read it. And this is a question from a young woman via Twitter at S. Davis. She asks, if you were filling a financial toolbox with tools to guide young girls throughout their lives, what would you have in it?
Well, if they were starting very, very, very young, I'd have them watch our Secret Millionaires Club, which is on, and talks to very, very young people. And we're talking to...
Explain the Secret Millionaires Club.
Secret Millionaires Club is a designed by Andy Hayward. It's a program on cable, and it's to teach lessons very early through an entertaining vehicle to young people on proper financial habits. The more you learn, the more you'll earn. All of that sort of thing, and invest in yourself. All of these lessons that some of us get at home, but a lot of us don't get at home, and it's very important starting on the right path early. And the program is equally for boys and girls. And then, as they get older, if you got an interest in business, just start reading about business, talk to local business people. You can't get enough of it. I mean, that's the way I learned, and I was lucky, but my sisters were not exposed to that.
What's the best thing someone can read?
Well, if they want to get into the investment world, the book I read when I was 19 was The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham, and that changed my life. I bought my first stock when I was 11, and I was having a lot of fun in stocks. I just wasn't making any money. And then when I was 19, I bought this book and I read it, and I'd read hundreds of books before that. But this gave me a philosophy, and I'm still using that philosophy.
And you think that book is still relevant?
It's very relevant.
Interesting. So, Warren, you've explained that Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In, kind of spurred you to write this essay and us to have this conversation. But I know from knowing you for about 15 years and knowing about you for much longer than that you really didn't used to be so conscious about women and the importance of giving women opportunity and promoting women. When did you come to consciousness?
Well, I'm not sure that there was any, moment on the road to Damascus or anything like that, but it just became aware. I became aware of it. Carol's a good example. I mean,
Carol Loomis, my colleague at Fortune, who has a dear friend of Warren's.
And for 30 years, Fortune did not have a woman writing articles. And then finally, in the early 1960s, I guess it was, they, because of Carol to some extent, they made the decision to do it. Now, imagine wasting half the talent, in terms of writing. If you look at the last 10 or 20 years and you look at the articles in Fortune and you take the author's name out, well, you can't tell which one are written by men or women, but for 30 years, they were just excluded. They were excluded from everything. I mean, it was a different world.
We have a question here at the University of Nebraska, Omaha, from Lee Y.Y. Taylor.
Hi, my name's Lee Y.Y. Taylor. Thank you for being here today. I'm a senior at the College of Business, managing in finance, banking, and investments. And my question to you today is, everyone in this room enrolled at UNO for one reason, to achieve success. For students, success largely means graduating and building our professional careers. Standing in your shoes today and looking back on your lessons learned, how do you define success?
Well, somebody said success is getting what you want. Happiness is wanting what you get. One doesn't preclude the other, but I would say when you get to be my age or even a little younger, I'm 82, if the people that you want to have love you, you're a success. You can have all the money in the world. You can have buildings named after you, hospital wings, whatever it may be. And unless you've got people that really care about you, you are not a success. And not everybody's going to make a fortune. Not everybody's going to be on football teams or whatever it may be. But if your children, the people you've worked with, if those people love you, after they've seen you in action for many, many years, you're a success.
Thank you.
I love that. That's beautiful.
There was a woman I knew some years back here in Omaha. Her name was Bella Eisenberg. She was in a concentration camp after World War II, a Polish Jew. And she looked at me one day, not too many years before she died, and she said, "I'm very slow to make friends, Warren, because when I look at someone, I say to myself, would they hide me?" And if you get to be 70 or 75 and you have a lot of people who would hide you, you are a success. Wow. And if nobody cares about you, I don't care how much money you have or how many medals you have or something of the sort, you are not a success.
That's beautiful. That's wonderful. Thank you for that. Carol Loomis has said publicly at the Fortune Most Powerful Women Summit, where Warren comes every year and is the only man invited the whole time. Carol Loomis at Fortune has said on stage that Warren Buffett is the least prejudiced executive I know. He is not prejudiced in terms of race, ethnicity, gender. You are biased about one thing.
What's that?
Brains?
Yeah, well, you like to hire people with brains. But even there, I would say this. I mean, there are all kinds of people who are doing wonderful things for the country. They aren't all intellectual giants or anything of the sort. If people do their best, that's what really counts. And if they have a concern for other people. So
what's more important than brains?
Well, I would say character. Yeah. I mean, brains you're born with. Yeah, you elect to have the kind of character you want. You can't do anything about, you can't do anything about whether you're male or female. You can't. There's a lot of things you can't do anything about. It's the things you can do something about, and where you elect the right road that I give people real credit for. There's people in this. I mean, a lot of them have made sacrifices to go to school here, or their parents have. I mean, they are out to fulfill their potential, and what we really want in this country are conditions that allow everybody to do that, equality of opportunity, and then we want people to pick up on it, and I admire the ones that do.
So have you changed at all in terms of hiring the best person regardless of gender, or do you consider gender in any kind of positive way? Well,
no, I think we've always tried to hire the best people, but initially I wasn't hiring very many people, if you go back a long ways. But there's a young woman here in the audience that joined us 3 years ago, and she is now the chairman of the board of 4 companies that Berkshire owns that have sales of over $4 billion. And she selected the CEO for 2 of those companies.
Tracy Britt, who is little known, Tracy's over here. She's 28 years old. Fortune put her on our 40 under 40 list last year, which is amazing people under 40. And good for you, Warren. You found Tracy, and it's extraordinary. And I've come to know Tracy, but she is the chairman of Johns Manville.
Benjamin Moore, Larson Jewell, which is a framing company, and Oriental Trading. And Johns Manville has sales of over $2 billion. But the interesting thing about Tracy, too, is she came from a farm in Kansas. I mean, so it isn't good for me. It's good for her. She's the one that decided where she wanted to go and then set out to do it.
And she is also your financial assistant, which means right. What?
Well, it means that she takes care of all kinds of things that come up, such as these 4 companies. They are her responsibility.
So, Warren, to this point that you're not sure when your consciousness about women in the workplace really came about, Susie, your daughter, has said that in the 60s, you were actually saying, wait till women wake up and realize that they are the slaves of the world.
Absolutely. I mean, they got, here's half the talent in the country that was basically put on the shelf largely. And I had these experiences. Well, I had the experiences with my sisters. My sisters are absolutely smart as I am and had all kinds of talent. And the expectation of my parents, of the teachers that they ran, of their friends, was that if they married well, that was sort of the crowning achievement. I mean, they had no thought of kind of going into the same kind of activities that I had. And, it was just a huge, huge waste of talent. I mean, let's just assume when I was born, instead of having that kind of a discrimination, that you decided that all men under 5'10" should only have 3 activities available to them. Like women basically had secretaries and nurses and teachers. All my teachers in grade school were women. And that didn't strike me as strange at the time. But here, 15 in a row, well, the odds against 15 in a row would be about 32,000 to 1 or something like that. So it just doesn't make any sense. But I didn't think about it. And my sisters didn't think about it. My parents didn't think about it. They loved them just as much. But it was sort of just the way it was, and it was accepted.
So, Warren, now that we are in an era where CEOs, corporate directors, you are thinking a lot more about enabling women to make it to the top, you actually say in your essay that you're very optimistic, more optimistic about the economy because of this. Well, explain that.
Yeah, well, any country that was only using half of its talent, has got a great future if it starts using all of it. I mean, it just stands to reason that if the United States got to where it was from 1776 and made all the progress it did, with more than half of that period, women really being shut out of most activities. So you had all this brain power and energy, ability, not totally going to waste, but certainly not reaching its potential. Just think what you can do when you get the whole team out there. You know, if Nebraska's going to play a football game and we just take every other player and let them go out on the field and leave the others behind, we're not going to play as well.
We're going to take a Twitter question from Tanvi _Gautam asks, who are your female role models and what have you learned from them?
Well, there were a number of them, starting really with my first wife. I mean, I would be a disaster if I hadn't have married her. And she opened my eyes to lots of things. But, you know, Carol's a role model. We've had managers that are. Catherine Graham was a terrific model. And I mentioned her in the article because Catherine Graham was the controlling shareholder, the CEO, chairman of the board of the Washington Post Company. She was the most powerful woman in the country, and she never believed it herself. I mean, she had been told by her mother that women shouldn't pay much attention to anything except, you know, garden parties. She'd been told by her husband that women were not as smart as men and couldn't really handle the same things. And then when her husband died, she inherited control of the Washington Post. She was terrified. She was absolutely terrified. She practiced in front of a mirror saying to the board of directors, I'm going to actually be active. A number of people wanted her to sort of be on the sidelines. Kay was very, very, very bright. I got to know her very well. She was high grade. She had really high standards. She was terrified of the job of being CEO, and she was convinced, totally convinced, that a man could do it better than she could. And we talked about it and talked about it and talked about it. And I said, you got to get rid of this funhouse mirror. You know, the world has placed this funhouse mirror in front of you, and it distorts you. That isn't you. We've got to get a real mirror up there that shows this person who's super high grade and lots of talent and somebody I would pick, you know, to run a lot of things. But she never fully got over it. I mean, it just shows you how ingrained something like it can become. Her stock went up 40 for 1 while she ran the company, 4,000%. You'd think that'd make somebody feel pretty confident about themselves. It didn't. She won a Pulitzer Prize for her autobiography. You'd think that might make somebody pretty confident about themselves. It never got rid of the feeling in her stomach. And so it's so important that women get rid of those funhouse mirrors. You can't put limitations on yourself. And some men put limitations on themselves, too. I mean, it's not just limited to women. But society put that funhouse mirror in front of women for, well, centuries. And getting rid of it is just enormously important.
Catherine Graham was the first female Fortune 500 CEO, and Washington Post Company has been one of your most successful investments.
Correct, and in no small part due to her. But if she was here, she would immediately start denying that was the case. If the average male was here, he would say, "You're not giving me enough credit," and Kay would have said, "Oh no, it wasn't me. It wasn't me." You know. Women have to get over that. They have to get like the males and claim credit for way more than they do.
So, Warren, in the spirit of this being your first social interview, how do you feel about going on Twitter?
Well, it's pretty daring, but I'll try.
I think we may have a little surprise for everyone here. So, Warren.
Okay, does it bite?
I don't think so. Do you understand Twitter?
So-so.
I know you don't like investing in technology companies, so I'm like thinking that this is a big step.
Yeah, but the co-founder came from Nebraska, so it can't all be bad.
Oh, excellent. So Warren Buffett's first tweet, all I can say, it better be interesting. It better be entertaining. Yeah. And
here we go, huh?
Tweet away.
Okay. There we go. Are we in business?
I think we're in business.
Okay.
What's your first tweet?
Warren is in the house.
So Warren,
who says you can't teach an old dog new tricks?
what does this mean? Warren Buffett has a Twitter account. What are you going to be? What are you going to be tweeting?
Well, it means my family can no longer say I'm lodged back in the 19th century.
You know, the essay that Warren wrote for Fortune. I was with Peter, Warren's youngest son, youngest of his 3 children, yesterday, and I asked Carol and Peter Buffett. I said, now, where does Warren get these statistics, like on how long it took for the Supreme Court to, how many male chief justices after women got the right to vote before Sandra Day O'Connor was? Who does that for Warren? Who does that for Warren?
Nobody does it. I go to the computer and go to search, and I must say, I love the computer for that. I mean, the things I used to have to go to the library for, go downtown and spend an hour and find a parking place and so on, or even mail away for. I mean, the information that's available, it helps me enormously. I don't use it at the office. I use it at home.
Yeah, you don't have a computer on your desk at the office.
That's true. But
you use one
at home, and I do writing at home usually, and to be able to find out when the first woman became an appellate court judge, or how many judges were there between the 20th Amendment or the 19th Amendment and Sandra Day O'Connor's appointment and so on. All that stuff. It's just, I love it. I mean, the idea of having all that kind of information is available. It's just
and then you just calculate in your head that the odds of a woman not being appointed in that span of years is 8 billion to 1.
It's a little over 8 billion to 1.
Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about women and management. So how does your view of women and how women need to lean in, to use a Sheryl Sandberg term, be more bold, as you talked about with Katharine Graham, how does that translate or affect the way you manage Berkshire Hathaway today?
Well, my job, I sit here in Omaha, and we have 24 people in the home office, and we have 285,000 or something like that working around the world. My job is to have the right people in the top slots for those businesses. Mm-hmm. Those managers need to decide how to get the top slots filled within their own individual companies. Now, most of the time when we buy a business, the management comes with it. I mean, the owners are selling to us. So I don't have to change managements very often, but when I do, it's my job to pick the best manager. And as I mentioned, I've given Tracy the responsibility for 4 companies, and we made management changes at 2 of those that she made the decision on. But she thinks about it the same way I think about it. I mean, who is best going to do this job? And it doesn't make any difference. Their age doesn't really make any difference to us. Their sex doesn't make any difference to it. Their educational background doesn't. I mean, in the end, we need to come up with the best person to run it, because talent is scarce. Mm-hmm. And you want somebody in there, you want somebody who's going to feel like it's their own business, even though we own it. You want them to have a feeling of ownership. And because we give enormous responsibility to the managers of our business, probably more than any large company that I can think of in the world. So therefore, we better have the most talented. And we cannot afford to have any kind of a blacklist as to who we won't put in the job. I mean, if somebody's 30 and they're the best, great. If they're 60 and they're the best, great. If they're male and they're great, female, just whatever they may be.
And when did you put your first woman on the Berkshire Hathaway board?
Well, the first woman was put on the board of Berkshire actually was my first wife, Susie. But then in the last 5 appointments we've made, 3 have been women, including we've got a wonderful woman joining us at this annual meeting, Meryl Whitmer. And we look for, we have a different set of criteria than many companies do. People generally, many companies just sort of go for a routine that the lawyers kind of write up the proxy statement and all that sort of thing. We've actually thought very hard about who we want to have be directors of Berkshire. We want them to be business savvy, and we want them to be shareholder oriented, and we want them to have a strong interest in Berkshire. Now, there's lots of very smart people who we would not want on the board of Berkshire. They don't know that much about business. They're very good at medicine. They're very good at this or that, just like I would not be any good on a medical board. But so we're not looking for big names. We're looking for big brains about Berkshire's businesses and people that will care.
So now you have 3 women on the Berkshire board. Charlotte Guyman, besides your late wife, was the first woman that you recruited onto the board. That was 2003. And I mean, I just have to ask, that was a time when most companies had women on boards. So why did it take you so long?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. and I don't have a good answer, incidentally. But I did anticipate my whole thinking in terms of as the Berkshire fortunes grew and all of that was that Susie, my first wife, would outlive me. She was a little younger than I was, and women live longer. And all of my Berkshire holdings were going to go to a foundation. And it was a foundation that she was going to run if she outlived me. Incidentally, it would have been, if she had outlived me and I died, it would have been the largest foundation in the world, and it would have had a majority of women as trustees. It still is a foundation that's the 7th largest in the United States in terms of annual gifts, and it does have a majority of its trustees are women. So we were putting women on the board of what I regarded as the most important entity in my life, in terms of where the fortune would go. But in terms of the board of Berkshire, I really sort of treated it as my own province for a long time, and I didn't consult the board about a whole lot of things. I can confess that now because I've gotten better.
Really, you have gotten better. What made you better?
Well, probably public pressure to some degree, and I always controlled Berkshire. So as a practical matter, and it goes way back to a partnership I had and everything. So I was used to making my own decisions and sort of announcing it to the world afterwards.
Give us an example of a decision that you would consult the board on today that maybe you wouldn't have.
Well, the overwhelming decision is succession. We spend more time by far on that at board meetings because if I should die tonight, it's very important who takes over tomorrow. It's very important that decision's already been made and that everybody's on board among the board members on that decision. So that is the key factor at Berkshire. It really isn't. Our businesses are running extremely well. I can tell our directors what's going on with them, and they read our 10Ks and 10Qs. But there's not a lot of discussion on that. Although we have one meeting in the fall when we have managers. For a couple of days, we have managers of 8 of our businesses come in, and we do a deep dive into all these businesses, and directors enjoy that. But they feel good about the businesses we own. They feel good about the managers, but they know that I won't be there the next day at some point, and that who they pick to run the place is enormously important.
Sure is.
Yeah. And we've got the right directors to make that decision, and I'm glad there's some women on the board to make it too. I've got one.
Charlotte Guyman, Sue Decker, who was at Yahoo years ago and is on a number of big boards.
Yeah, we've got 6 directors that are under 60. They are the directors of the future, and 3 of those are women. But they weren't picked particularly because they were men or women now. I mean, these are people that meet those 3 tests that I laid out.
This last board appointment, Meryl Whitmer, who is a woman, were you desiring another female board member? If it was
a toss-up, I wanted to give it to a woman, but it had to be a toss-up.
Why?
I'm not going to sacrifice.
No, but why, if it was a toss-up, did you want to give it to a woman?
I just thought we ought to have more in those positions, and I think there's a chicken and egg thing in terms of women advancing in business. I mean, they got to get the visibility, and they don't get it, and therefore they aren't thought of, and you just get this circular thing. So I like the idea, frankly, of women of talent becoming recognized as women of talent.
Good. That's what this is all about. We have another student. Allison Watson has a question. Allison?
Hi, Warren.
Hi.
My name is Allison Watson. I am an MBA student here at the University of Nebraska-Omaha. And my question is, as a woman in the workforce who's raising 2 young kids, working full-time, and going to school for my MBA, there's an immense amount of pressure to do it all. What strides have you taken with your companies to help women do it all while still advancing through their career?
Yeah, I think I empathize with you. You've got a way tougher job than I had. I mean, it is just not easy to have children and throw in the education part too. So we only have 24 people at the headquarters. So we have 40-some thousand working at Burlington Northern and 27,000 at Geico. Those companies have their own policies, but I certainly urge every one of our managers to do what they can to make it easier, because it just isn't easy. I mean, Carol Loomis had two children when she was writing at Fortune one time, and I asked her in about 1969 or 70, shortly after I got to know her, I said, how in the world do you do it? Because she would work straight through the night on stories and all, and the 2 young kids, and it was interesting. I've never heard Carol complain about anything. She just said, it's hard. And I mean, it is hard. And it's harder for the women, frankly, than the men in most cases, because they can't feel that, if there's a problem, that they shouldn't attend to it. And some of us may all still kind of sail by and say somebody else should take care of it. I think daycare centers are an important thing. I think flexible hours, are certainly the case. We have a young woman who is running our annual meeting, Carrie Soba. She is off the chart good. I mean, it's just amazing. She's about, 4 or 5 months pregnant now, and she is putting on this annual meeting. People coming from all over the world, 46 countries. She's got hundreds and hundreds of people from our subsidiaries that are out there today, putting up their exhibits and doing all of this. And she is in charge of the whole thing. And
so what strides do you take to enable someone like Carrie?
Well, Carrie is going to take at least 6 months off when she has the child, and then she
That's better than Yahoo's new maternity
well
policy.
she can do what she wants. I mean, in the end, she can do what she'll learn what it's like. I mean, she doesn't know yet exactly how she's going to react to all this. She's obviously quite maternal, but she loves her job. And incidentally, she just has got it. She's just getting her master's degree too. I mean, she's an amazing woman, and we will do whatever we need to do to try and keep her at Berkshire and running the meeting.
When you have a small business like Berkshire Hathaway, which happens to be in the top 5 companies in terms of market capitalization in the world, but you have a small company that has 24 people at headquarters, you can pretty much individualize the
That's true.
The policies.
Sure. And we do.
Peter Buffett, Warren's son, who I saw yesterday, he has a question for you.
Oh. Finally he gets even.
Peter asks, would you take actions at Berkshire Hathaway to make it easier for women to advance? Such as, we were talking about paid sick leave being a big barrier for women.
In terms of the subsidiaries, the managers do get to run their businesses. I mean, and I can express my views here. I can express it to them privately, but I do give them the responsibility for running their businesses. So I do not tell them virtually anything to do except to behave in a way that can be put on the front page of the newspaper. So I have not gone to the CEO of Geico and say, do it this way or that way. I don't know his business as well as I do, and I don't know the needs of the 27,000 people, how they interact. I mean, there are some places where I think flexible work would work very well, but there's other places where it's not going to work. It's not going to work on a railroad very well. And so they hear me talk at something like this. They read what I write, but they do run their own businesses, and that's one of the things that's very unusual about Berkshire.
Calvert Investments put out a diversity survey this year that ranked, you probably know this, ranked Berkshire Hathaway last among the S&P 100 companies because, you know the reason.
I read it to me.
Berkshire does not have a diversity policy.
Yeah, we don't have a diversity policy.
which
Yeah.
landed you sort of in the doghouse.
That's
with,
okay.
with
I mean,
them.
I believe in being honest about it. I have my own attitudes that I bring toward hiring people at the parent company. I express those attitudes through it, but it's the same way as with politics. I mean, most of my managers probably disagree with me on politics, but we own a bunch of newspapers. In the last election, 12 of our newspapers took a position on who should be president. 10 of them said Romney, 2 of them said Obama. I voted for Obama. I contributed to Obama. I mean, they do run their own businesses, and you can't say you're running your own businesses and then start issuing all kinds of edicts from headquarters.
Okay. Let's get back to the women who have had an influence in your life. What about Susie, your daughter?
Huge.
What's been her
my life would be way different without her. And that's true of my other children too, but she happens to live here in Omaha, so that she's my model for what I hope all women get to be currently. I mean, if somebody put a funhouse mirror up in front of her, she would just laugh and I think growing up in the house that she did helped on that. I mean, I had every bit as much confidence in her doing anything as males. In terms of the annual meeting, she helps out enormously, for example. But whatever it may be, if I give her or ask her, to help me out in some way, I just know it's going to get done right. She's just good.
We have a Twitter question from Christy Turlington, who well-known, very powerful woman who does wonderful things in the global social responsibility sphere, and actually was a famous model or in her earlier days. She comes to the Most Powerful Women Summit. You probably know Christy. She asks, Warren, what is the most important lesson you learned from your mother?
Well, my mother and I didn't get along that well most of the time. Well, not most of the time, but plenty of the time. I really learned my lessons in life from my father overwhelmingly. My father was the idol of all 3 of the children. And my mother, and it's interesting, I mean, in those days, my mother absolutely thought her job was there totally to serve my father. And my dad got elected to Congress. We moved to Washington. My mother didn't want to move to Washington. I mean, she had all her friends here and everything. But she wasn't, I don't know whether she was consulted or not, but she would have felt, no matter what, that she should do whatever my dad wanted her to do. So she lived a life that was dictated by my father's interests and and sort of the society of the time.
Did this bother you growing up?
No. Well, it bothered me that I didn't get along with my mother sometimes, yes, but I wasn't thinking about it that way at all. My mother was very, very smart. I mean, if you look at grades and all that sort of, I mean, but she never really got a chance to use it, and she was there basically to take care of everything that was needed in the family. Whether it would be. Well, we all came home for lunch in grade school. I mean, she was tied to a housekeeping duty, basically. And if he wanted to run for Congress, she had to be out there campaigning for him. I mean, it was serving him, and I think that was bad for her. I think that affected. I think probably deep down she may have felt that it really wasn't quite fair, but she also felt that was what she was supposed to do in life.
Based on your experience observing women at some of the companies that you have invested in, one of your biggest holdings is IBM,
right,
where Ginny Rometty, who is #1 on Fortune's Most Powerful Women list, is the CEO. And the Berkshire owned and operated companies, you have 5 female CEOs in the mix. We talked about Tracy Britt, the 28-year-old wonder who is chairman of 4 of your companies. Based on all that and your observations of them, do women manage differently?
No, I would say not that I can see particularly. No, it's interesting you bring up Ginny Rometty because we have put $13 billion, probably probably 12 or so billion dollars into IBM stock. And it didn't affect my decision one penny in terms of what I would pay one way or the other, that the CEO was going to be a female, and then was a female. We bought part of it before she took over and part afterwards. It just does not make any difference. It makes a huge difference how good she is. Yeah, but it just doesn't enter into my calculation at all. And we own a lot of stock in Coca-Cola. Well, let's say that they announced that the next CEO of Coca-Cola was going to be some woman whose name I don't even know now. That would just have no effect on investment decisions. I regard the economic prospects on a probability basis, of being identical, whether the CEO is a female or a male. Now, it makes a great deal of difference what kind of a female, what kind of a person they are, but not whether the sex doesn't make any difference.
I want to take a tiny break here to ask a question. How many Twitter followers does Warren have now? Can you let me know? And not 18,000, 20,000. He had more before.
No, I don't think so.
Okay,
no,
20,000 followers.
Yeah.
Warren Buffett. Terrific. Okay, it's building. We have a question from T. Valerie at Bankable. Warren, what kind of price premium would you add to a diverse company, and how would you define a diverse company?
Well, I would certainly subtract from any company where I thought they were picking people other than picking the best people. I mean, particularly, we'll say if the CEO is picking his idiot nephew, I will have a big subtraction for that. But I won't. If I read a proxy statement that says, we have this and that as a diversity policy, which is probably some boilerplate, maybe even that the lawyers stick on, I won't pay any attention to that. What I will care enormously about is whether they pick the best person. And I've been on boards where we haven't picked the best person. We've made a mistake. It wasn't made on a gender basis. We just made mistakes. So the Bible says, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. But it doesn't say that after they inherit the earth, whether they'll stay meek. So when you make somebody CEO, sometimes you find out that you've got a different person there than you thought you were going to have. You make mistakes.
So to this point, when you have been on boards, right, and you pick the wrong person to be CEO, is there any pattern there? Any lesson there?
Well, often the person has sort of been anointed by the previous CEO. And it's very difficult for a board to sort of buck that momentum that's there. And formerly, and still to an extent, but formerly it was very difficult for boards to really come to independent decision or to have an intelligent discussion on a subject. Because just say you're meeting at a board in New York and the directors come in from all over the country and you have some committee meetings and all of that and you have a scheduled agenda. It's very difficult to actually speak up in that environment and question the chairman's succession recommendation or something of the sort. It's a social situation to a degree more than people realize. And it's like belching at the dinner table. I mean, if you start raising questions about what the CEO is telling you. One of the great improvements in corporate governance, in fact, I think it's probably the most important item in the last 10 years, has been the once a year, or maybe more often, meeting that the board is now required to have without the CEO present. Mm-hmm. I have been involved in some of those, and I see a whole different level of discussion and tenor of discussion than when the CEO is present. So it's a lot of bad decisions have been made on succession, and you've seen them as a journalist. And
I have.
Yeah, and they're not easy to correct.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden at a board meeting called every 2 or 3 months, to say, I'd like to raise the subject of whether the chairman is worth a damn. It just doesn't happen. So rump meetings used to be held sometimes, that sort of thing, but not a very good procedure. this meeting without the chairman is a plus toward that, but it's still difficult.
And does that happen at most companies now, the meeting without the
Well,
chairman?
I think it's required, actually.
Okay, it's required.
Yeah, but the toughest thing, if the guy is an absolute crook or something, that's easy to take care of.
Right.
The real problem is when you've got a mediocre executive. If you've got a mediocre quarterback on a football team, you do something about it, and in a hurry. But if you've got a mediocre manager who's a perfectly pleasant guy, who may have even invited you onto the board, and he keeps raising your director's fees every year, that's a tough situation.
Yeah. What are your director's fees?
Our director's fees at Berkshire are $900 a year, which probably compares to an average of $300,000 or $400,000. But I want our directors, and they don't get directors and officers liability insurance. I want our directors to be in exactly the same position as the shareholders. If the company does well, I want them to do well through their stock ownership, which we don't give to them. They buy it in the market. And if it does lousy, I want them to feel the pain.
We have a question, another audience question from a student, Sierra Morris. Sierra?
Hi, Mr. Buffett.
Hi.
My name is Sierra Morris. I'm a senior in the Banking, Finance, and Investment program here at UNO. My question for you is, in the male-dominated industry of investments, what advice do you have for a young female professional such as myself looking to stand out and gain respect?
Yeah, it's really just the one thing about investing, and you're right about it, it's male-dominated, and the one thing about investing is if you can build a record that is good and have it audited so that people can check it, the world will find you then. I mean, they don't care whether you have bad breath or whatever it may be. They want their money run well, and I would advise anybody that, whether female or male, that wants to get into investment management, to learn all you can about it first. I mean, and then try to build an audited record, even if it's the tiniest little entity that you can, just because that's like the minor league batting average, is to the major league scout, and they won't care about your gender if they think you can make them a lot of money. I mean, I was kind of a peculiar person earlier on, maybe still am, and I used to operate out of a room, 55th and Farnham, a room off my bedroom in the house. For 6 years I operated that way. People, that was not designed to impress people, but the numbers impress people, and that's why money came to me. So the earlier you can get the start on it. Now, you can't learn enough about investments. I mean, just read everything you can and invest a little of your own money. Doesn't make any difference whether it's $100 or $1,000, because you've got to do things with real money to experience investing. It can't be explained just by looking at words and pictures. And then build up some kind of a little audited record, or maybe if you can get a job with some place where you've got responsibility for something where you can prove that this is what I did with money, because that's how you get to the major leagues.
And the most important thing to keep in mind if you're investing in stocks is what?
Is to always get more for your money than you pay. It's like buying anything else. And
What's the biggest mistake people make, though?
Well, the biggest mistake they make is listening to a lot of other people and buying something because they think it's going to go up next week or next month. And for whatever reason people give you, you should understand what you buy. Now, if you buy a farm, you look at the farm and you say, I expect to get so many bushels per acre of corn or soybeans, and you figure out how much that'll be worth, and then you figure out what the price should be. If you buy an apartment house, you look at what the rentals will be and what the taxes and expenses will be, and then you decide how much income you'll have, and you pay a fair price for that. But you don't, in stocks, people, their neighbor whispers something to them, and they run out and spend money that it took them years to earn. So you always want to look at the productive ability of the asset you're buying, whether it's a farm, apartment house, or a company, but the company is represented by a stock. And if you always get your money's worth, you'll do very well.
We have one more audience question. Christopher Tanegis. I'm probably not saying that right. Christopher, tell me.
We finally got to a male. We had 3 females in a row. But
exactly.
You made it.
I aspire to be the next only male invited to the Fortune Women of Investing. So, Chris Tanegis in the Executive MBA program here at UNO. My question is about something we chatted a little about earlier. You'd like to be known as a teacher of people, and what are some of your more vivid memories of teaching here at UNO? And if you were to teach a class today, what would that class be?
Yeah, well, I would teach a class in investing, and it would be how to value a business and then how to think about the stock market. And if you got an A in both those classes, you would do very well. That's all you need to know. I mean, first you have to figure out what things are worth, and then you have to develop a philosophy about the stock market, where you are buying businesses and not buying little ticker symbols or whatever it may be. I had a lot of fun teaching here over the years. Made a lot of friends through teaching, and I saw Paula Zahn here a few years back. Well, I had her parents, Norman and Betty Zahn, in my class, 30 years early, and Betty had written me a poem, and I sent it to Paula. It just comes back. That's true throughout life, incidentally. I mean, you meet people in all different walks of life, and then you intersect in the strangest ways later on, and overwhelmingly, it's positive.
So, Warren, we have one more from Twitter. This is at Chairman Bliss. It's kind of to me. Just ask Warren Buffett if he'll go out with me to a Dairy Queen to share a Coca-Cola.
Well, I go out with my great-grandchildren on Sundays, and I have 7 that are in the general area here, and we have a terrific time at Dairy Queen, and we make a lot of noise. I don't advise you to come at the same time we're there, because we sort of take over the place, but Tracy comes out with us occasionally too, and we have a lot of fun. But Dairy Queen is a great social spot, and it certainly is intergenerational. I mean, you can have a lot of fun with your, in my case, great-grandchildren as well as grandchildren and children.
Well, I love doing a live video chat, Warren Buffett's first social conversation with an 82-year-old guy who is getting more popular by the second. You know what you're up to?
No.
32,000 followers.
Wow.
Let's give a good round of applause to that. Warren, thank you so much. This has been a delight. Good luck annual meeting weekend, and
we'll have a lot of fun.
Kill it.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.